My name is Sarah D'Angelo. Today I'm going to be talking about my final project for Education 522 Instructional Technology. I am a special education teacher serving primarily 3 to 5-year-olds with severe and profound disabilities. The problem that I found in my classroom is that students really weren't engaging in any activity appropriately without teacher support. So during free times during the day when they should be playing, students were often engaging in self-stimulatory behavior, such as sucking on their hands or knocking their hands on their wheelchair trays or chewing on toys. And self-stimulatory behavior is any behavior that's function is just automatic sensory input. And so students were engaging in self-stimulatory behavior rather than playing appropriately or engaging appropriately with an alternative activity. What I already knew about this problem from some research and just from my experience is that self-stimulatory behavior is really common in students with severe and profound disabilities, and that it can be really damaging to academic outcomes. It makes it really hard to pay attention because students are so engaged in that behavior that they have a hard time paying attention to other things or engaging in more appropriate activities because they're so focused on stimming. I came up with a plan in which students would aim to engage independently in something they could do by themselves with minimal teacher support, which ended up being the iPad. Cause and effect games on the iPad or a story on the iPad is something that most of my students could engage with fairly independently in the classroom. And so I set it up so during one free time during the day, they were working with the iPad, and during one free time in the day, they were playing in another area of the room with more hands-on materials. And then we took frequency data during those 2 time periods of how much each student was engaging in self-stimulatory behavior during each of those time periods. And we targeted different behaviors for different students because each student's behavior looks really different. And another thing was that we only took data for the first 5 minutes of that activity, just for purely ease of taking that data and making sure that we're getting all our other things done during the day. This is the data collection measure that I used, and my instructional associates helped me to take this data as well. So we observed the students for the first 5 minutes of the activity and tallied the amount of times that they engaged in their own target behavior. So as you can see in the target behavior column, each student's behavior is different. And so we only took frequency of those specific behaviors listed in that target behavior column for each student. What I found out was really that my hypothesis that use of the iPad would decrease self-stimulatory behavior was dead wrong, and it ended up increasing self-stimulatory behavior in my students. I think that this is because they were so visually engaged with the iPad that they would absent-mindedly do some of those stimming behaviors while they were engaging with the iPad. And so as you can see in each column for each student, the average number of times they engaged in their behavior was higher during the iPad session than during the play session. And that's true overall when you look at just overall data for each here in this column. I also found out just from observing my students during the time they were playing and during the time they were with the iPad that they were really engaged with the iPad, a lot more engaged than they were when working with typical play materials. So there was that benefit, and students were a lot more active with the iPad. They would activate the games and they would look at the story that was being read. And those are things I don't typically see when they're interacting with typical classroom materials. So while they were way more engaged, they were also engaging in that self-stimulatory behavior. So this fits in with existing research because existing research says that including the iPad in instruction can result in gains in visual attention, which I definitely saw from observation, and active participation with the materials, which I also saw, but I don't have data to back that up there. And then it also fits in that young children with significant disabilities may be more engaged with the iPad than with other classroom materials, which is something I also saw through observation. But what I think we really need more research in is the effect that that iPad has on their independence in the classroom, specifically students with more significant disabilities. Because I did see a greater level of independence, but unfortunately, because I was focusing on the frequency of self-stimulatory behavior, I wasn't taking that hard data on independence. And here are my sources. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation.